Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into something super important for relationships, emotional compatibility. We've got this lecture and it breaks down what it means, how to spot the signs, and why it even matters. So we're going way past those surface level, clicking vibes. You know what I mean? By the end of this deep dive, you'll have some solid takeaways to think about, for your own life.
Totally. I think a lot of people, they talk about emotional compatibility,
Mhm.
but they don't really about what it means, like practically.
Exactly. So what does it mean to be emotionally compatible?
It's more than just getting along or even like having the same interests. It's this deeper connection where you understand, accept, and support each other's emotional needs. Think of it like
Yeah.
being able to handle life's ups and downs together, not just the good times.
Makes sense. And it's not just some feel-good idea either. The lecturer mentions a study from the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships. Emotionally compatible couples, they say they have way more relationship satisfaction and, get this, less conflict. Who wouldn't want that?
Right, and it makes sense if you think about it. Emotional compatibility, it's the base for trust, intimacy, and respect. And those aren't just buzzwords, they're like the foundation of a good relationship.
Okay, so we know it's important, but how do we know if we found it? The lecture has a few signs of emotional compatibility. First one is open and honest communication.
Yeah, and that might seem obvious, but it's more than just talking. It's about making a space where you can say how you feel, your thoughts, concerns, even the tough stuff, without being judged.
Like really feeling heard and understood.
Yes, and the lecture gives this example. Sarah and Tom, they were disagreeing about money, which, can be a big deal for couples, but instead of arguing, they sat down and talked about their worries. Sarah was worried about spending too much, and Tom, he was worried about not saving enough.
So being open and honest, help them understand each other and find a solution that worked. That's emotional compatibility in action.
Exactly. It's about approaching disagreements, wanting to understand each other,
Yeah.
and finding common ground.
Okay, so open communication's key.
Mhm.
What about empathy? Where does that fit in?
Empathy is huge, GE. For emotional compatibility, I mean. It's being able to not just understand your partner's feelings, but share them too. Emotionally compatible couples, they have a ton of empathy, and it creates this strong bond.
The lecturer mentioned research on this. From the University of Michigan, couples with lots of empathy, they have less conflict and more satisfaction in their relationships. It makes you wonder, is empathy something you're born with, or can you learn it?
That's a really good question, and honestly, people disagree on that, but whether it's innate or learned, empathy is super important for
Yeah.
building those emotional connections.
Totally. It's connecting on a deeper level and being there for each other
Hmm.
emotionally.
Hmm.
Which brings us to the next sign. Emotional support. What's that look like in a relationship?
It's being there for each other, through good times and bad, celebrating the wins, comforting during the hard times, validating each other's feelings, and giving a sense of security and understanding.
Like Lisa and John from the lecture. They both have busy jobs, and when one's feeling overwhelmed, the other is there to listen and encourage. That kind of support.
Hmm.
It strengthens the bond, helps them both thrive.
Exactly. It's knowing you have someone in your corner, no matter what.
Now, the next sign, I think people get this wrong sometimes. Shared values and goals. Some might think it's just having the same hobbies or liking the same things. But the lecture says it's deeper than that.
You're right. Hobbies can be fun, but they're not the core of emotional compatibility. Shared values, those are your beliefs about
Hmm.
family, work, life goals, the big stuff. When you agree on those, you're more likely to face challenges as a team and build a life that feels good for both of you.
And it's not just an opinion either. The lecture mentions a study from the Journal of Marriage and Family. Couples with the same values, they had more relationship satisfaction and fewer divorces.
Yeah.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about a relationship that lasts.
Exactly. And it challenges that whole opposites attract thing. Differences can be fun at first, but when it comes to the foundation of your relationship, shared values are stronger for the long term. It's
Yeah.
about building a life that's meaningful for both of you.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've talked about open communication, empathy, support, shared values, all important for emotional compatibility.
Yeah.
But let's be real. Conflict happens in every relationship. So
Mhm.
how do we emotionally compatible couples? How do they deal with disagreements?
That's a great point. It's not about avoiding conflict, because that's just not real. Emotionally compatible couples are actually good at resolving conflict in a healthy way.
So instead of shutting down, getting defensive
Hmm.
or ignoring things. They try to understand each other and
Yeah.
find a solution that works for both.
Exactly. And there's research on this too, the Journal of Family Psychology. They found that couples who communicate well during conflict, like really listening and being empathetic, they have way more relationship satisfaction.
It's about turning those arguments
Yeah.
into chances to grow and understand each other better. The lecture had this example, Maya and Aaron. They were disagreeing about where to live
Yeah.
after getting married. But instead of fighting,
Yeah. They explained their worries, listened to each other, and found a solution that worked for both of them. They turned a bad situation into a moment of connection.
that's amazing. Okay, so communication, empathy, support, shared values,
Yeah.
and even conflict resolution. What other signs are there?
Well, one that people miss a lot is quality time. And I don't just mean being in the same room, but truly being present with each other.
So not just watching TV together or on your phones next to each other,
Yeah.
but actually engaging with each other, talking, sharing experiences.
Exactly. And the research agrees. A study in personal relationships found that couples who prioritize quality time, like date nights, hobbies, or just talking, they feel more connected and satisfied.
It makes sense. Like Jenna and Chris from the lecture. They have a no-phones dinner once a week just to focus on each other.
Absolutely. It's carving out time to nurture the bond. And speaking of nurturing the bond, that brings us to another sign, mutual respect.
So respect is more than just being polite, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's valuing each other, your opinions, your boundaries. When there's respect, both partners feel safe and appreciated. And that makes the relationship stronger.
It's about honoring each other's needs, even when they're different from yours. And, research supports this too. A study in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that couples who are appreciative and respectful, they're less likely to burn out in their relationship.
Exactly. It shows how important respect is, maybe even more than attraction, because, attraction fades, but respect keeps the connection strong.
That makes sense. So, life is unpredictable. How do flexibility and adaptability, how do they fit into emotional compatibility?
That's a great question. Emotionally compatible couples, they're good at rolling with the punches, job changes, health issues, family stuff. They face it as a team, knowing they have each other.
That reminds me of Emma and Ryan from the lecture. They had this big vacation planned,
Hmm.
and then Ryan lost his job. But instead of freaking out,
Right. They changed their plans, found a cheaper place to go, and still had an amazing time. That adaptability, it didn't just save their trip, it made their bond stronger. It's about handling the unexpected without letting it ruin the relationship.
that's a great example of how flexibility can actually strengthen a relationship. All right, last sign of emotional compatibility, and it's a big one, trust and honesty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trust is the base of any strong relationship. When you can trust your partner, it creates a safe space to be vulnerable and connect deeper. It lets you be yourself without worrying about being judged.
And again, research backs this up. The American Psychological Association found couples with a lot of trust, they have less anxiety and more relationship satisfaction.
Right. When you trust your partner, you don't have to worry about what they're doing. You can just be present in the relationship.
Laura and Jake from the lecture, they're super open about their fears and insecurities, and that creates trust
Yeah.
where they can talk about problems.
Exactly. They get that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's actually the key to deeper connection.
Wow, this has been eye-opening. Emotional compatibility. It's about more than just getting along. It's about real connection, support, and growth.
You got it. And while we focus on the good stuff, there can be challenges too. Relationships aren't always easy.
That's true.
Emotional compatibility is like this awesome base for a relationship, but it's not always a walk in the park. There can be some roadblocks.
Right, not always
Mhm.
perfect.
Yeah.
So what kind of challenges pop up? When it comes to emotional compatibility, you mean,
Well, the lecture talks about past trauma and insecurity as obstacles.
yeah, makes sense. Past stuff, especially the bad stuff. It can totally mess with how we do relationships.
For sure. It's like bringing baggage into new connections. It can make it harder to trust, to be open, and even to see healthy connections when they're right there.
And there's, like, different opinions on this already. Some people think you should just forget about the past
Yeah.
when starting a new relationship.
Yeah, but that's kind of oversimplifying it. It's not always easy to just forget about those experiences. Our lecture source, they say. It's important to acknowledge past trauma and work through it for your own healing and for better relationships in the future.
Yeah, you can't just pretend it didn't happen. Ignoring it might make you less emotionally available, but facing it can make you more self-aware and a better partner.
Exactly. It's understanding how those experiences affect you in the relationship. Another challenge that pops up a lot is different communication styles.
Oh, yeah. That's gotta be tough. Everyone communicates differently, and sometimes those styles just clash.
Right. Imagine one person is super direct and the other is, more passive or avoids conflict. That can cause a lot of misunderstandings, hurt feelings, frustration if they don't deal with it.
So it's not about one person being right or wrong. It's about recognizing the differences and figuring out how to navigate them.
Exactly. And the good news is you can. There's a study from the Journal of Communication. Couples who try to understand and adapt to each other's communication styles, they have fewer conflicts and smoother interactions overall.
It's not about changing who you are. It's about being mindful of how you communicate and meeting in the middle.
Right. Now, the last challenge the lecture talks about is unresolved conflict.
Yeah, we've all been there. That feeling when things are just left unsaid.
Yeah. It's tempting to avoid conflict, especially if you like things to be calm. But those unresolved issues, even small ones, they can build up and create distance.
Lecture heads Sam and Alex, they always avoided tough conversations. They thought they were keeping the peace, but it was actually hurting their relationship.
Yeah. But then they tried couples therapy. And that's when things changed. They learned to communicate their needs and talk about the hard stuff in a way that felt safe.
And what happened?
They got closer, they faced those tough conversations, and ended up stronger than ever.
That's awesome. So we've talked about challenges to emotional compatibility, but the lecture gives us some strategies too for making it stronger.
Yeah. And the key thing is, emotional compatibility isn't a finish line. It's an ongoing thing. It takes effort, but it's worth it.
I like that. Like anything good, right? It takes work, but the payoff is huge.
Yeah.
So how do we nurture emotional compatibility?
One simple but effective thing is regular check-ins. I know it sounds basic, but talking about your feelings, your
Mhm.
worries, anything that's on your mind, it can make a big difference.
Like checking in on the relationship, see how things are doing.
Exactly. And there's research on this too, a study in the Journal of Relationship Research. Couples who have regular check-ins, whether it's a date night or just a quick chat, they feel more connected and satisfied.
So it's about being proactive, not waiting for problems to happen.
Right. But sometimes, even when you're trying your best, couples might need some extra help.
You mean therapy?
Yeah, people still get weird about therapy. But the lecture says a lot of successful couples, they say therapy helped them communicate better, handle challenges, and deepen their connection.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a fresh perspective, someone to help you communicate.
Right. Think of it like a coach for your relationship.
I like that. What else does the lecture suggest?
Another good strategy is focusing on personal growth.
How does that relate to emotional compatibility?
Well, when you work on yourself through therapy, self-help, new experiences, you become more self-aware and emotionally intelligent.
And those are important for relationships, right? You can be there for someone else
Yeah.
if you haven't worked on yourself.
Exactly. And there's research here too. A study in personal relationships found that people who work on their personal growth, they're better partners in their romantic relationships.
It's like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. You got to take care of yourself so you can be your best in relationships.
Absolutely. And it's not just about individual growth. It's also about growing together as a couple.
Oh, interesting. How do you do both?
Well, the last tip in the lecture, it's about active listening.
Active listening. That's so important. But it's more than just nodding along, right?
Right. It's being present when your partner's talking. Eye contact, asking questions, reflecting what you hear to make sure you understand.
It takes effort, but it makes you feel heard and understood.
Exactly. The lecture mentions Karen and Mark. They totally transformed the relationship through active listening. They became better listeners, so they resolved conflicts better and felt truly seen by each other.
Active listening is like a superpower.
It is. It builds that closeness. That's at the heart of any good relationship.
Wow, we've covered so much. Defining emotional compatibility, seeing the signs, the challenges, and learning how to make it stronger. I feel like I get it now. What it really means to be emotionally compatible.
It's been a journey, hasn't it? It shows how important emotional compatibility is for creating lasting, fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
It has. And before we finish, I want you to think about this. Imagine you put emotional compatibility first in all your relationships. How would that change your choices, your interactions, even the types of relationships you look for?
Whoa, that's deep. It makes you think about what really matters. when building connections.
Exactly. It's recognizing that emotional compatibility is the key to any truly fulfilling relationship.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you got some good insights for your own relationships.
It's been great exploring this with you.
Until next time, keep diving deep.